Her husband and children did not even suspect what their mother and wife did during the Second World War. How did the KGB, by chance, manage to catch a Tonka machine gunner who executed more than 1,000 people? At the height of the war, an unusual formation arose in the occupied territories, the Lokot Republic. This is a quasi-autonomous district created by collaborators with the support of high-ranking German military leaders, General Heinz Guderian and Field Marshal Gunther von Kluge, commander of Army Group Center. The Lokot Republic existed under Nazi control from the autumn of 1941 until the summer of 1943. It united 8 districts, which today are part of the Bryansk, Orel, and Kursk regions. The local administration was entrusted with key responsibilities: tax collection, food supplies for the Wehrmacht, and ensuring the safety of cargo transportation through the controlled territory. Interestingly, the Germans tried to minimally interfere in the affairs of self-government. The occupiers were especially willing to transfer to the local police the authority to shoot captured partisans and underground workers. Given that the region was known for a strong partisan movement, the collaborators had enough work. Dozens of partisans were taken daily, as well as local residents suspected of helping them. In the history of the Lokot Republic, a special place is occupied by a figure known as Tonka, the machine gunner, a woman who became the most ruthless executioner of this region. She has more than 1,500 executed partisans and civilians, which makes her one of the most brutal war criminals of the Second World War. The search for this criminal began immediately after the liberation of the area by Soviet troops. However, it was only discovered and exposed 35 years after the end of the war. In 1979, she was sentenced to death, becoming the first of 3 women executed in the Soviet Union after Stalin's death. Paradoxically, the beginning of Tonka's life did not foreshadow such a tragic turn of fate. After school, she graduated from medical school and entered a technical school, dreaming of becoming a doctor. Her idol was Anka, the machine gunner from the popular film Chapaev. This hobby led to the fact that at the beginning of the war, she graduated from machine gun courses and volunteered. In the autumn of 1941, she miraculously survived the defeat of Soviet troops near Vyazma. Together with a colleague, she wandered through the woods for several months, trying to escape from the environment. However, her traveling companion turned out to be unreliable. When he reached his native village, where he had a family, he abandoned Antonina. Left alone, she supported herself for a while with odd jobs, including prostitution, until she found herself in Elbow. At first, she served the police, but soon she was offered a job as an executioner. Tempted by the relatively prosperous life of the collaborators, she agreed. Her tool was the Maxim machine gun, and the payment was 30 marks for each execution, plus the belongings of the executed. At first, she could only do this terrible job while intoxicated, but over time she began to act coolly and prudently. Her conscience stopped tormenting her. She perceived it simply as work, justifying herself by saying that the war will write everything off. The search for Tonka the machine gunner after the war dragged on for many years. Apart from the nickname and verbal descriptions of local residents, the investigators had no leads. The case was passed from one investigator to another, but no new data could be obtained. The KGB investigators made every effort, but to no avail. In 1976, an accidental incident on the city square of Bryansk gave an unexpected impetus to the investigation of the case of Tonka the machine gunner. A fight between 2 men led to an arrest, during which it turned out that one of the participants identified the other as the former head of the Lokot prison, Ivanin. During interrogations, Ivanin not only confessed, but also called the name of the infamous Tonka machine gunner, Makarov. This gave investigators new hope. They began a large-scale check of all Antonine Makarovs in the USSR suitable for age. There were about 300 of them. The most likely candidate was found in Serpukhov. Ivanin was brought in for identification, but he unexpectedly committed suicide. Other witnesses have not confirmed that this is the same woman. Further verification of the Makarovs has reached a dead end. The reason for the failure lay in an unexpected place. Tonka's birth certificate listed her as Antonina Makarovna Panfilova. An error with the last name occurred when enrolling in school. For some reason, the parents did not correct this error, and the new surname migrated to all subsequent documents. Antonina herself is also used to it. By the end of the war, the story of Tonka the machine gunner had become even more confusing. Contrary to the assumptions of the investigators, the Germans did not plan to rescue the collaborators. Antonina, however, managed to find an unexpected way to escape. She became close to a German lance corporal who took her first to Ukraine and then to Poland. Fate continued to present surprises. After the death of Corporal Antonina, she ended up in a concentration camp near Königsberg. 1945 brought a new turn in her life. When the Soviet troops took the city, Antonina, using someone else's military ticket that fell into her hands, managed to impersonate a nurse who allegedly fought from 1941 to 1944. She even managed to get a job at the hospital. There was an event that finally changed her fate. The wounded Sergeant Ginsberg fell in love with Antonina. A few days later, their marriage was registered right in the hospital. Antonina took her husband's last name and received new, now completely clean documents. Antonina's post-war life turned out surprisingly well. Together with her husband, they first settled in the Kaliningrad region and then moved to the Belarusian Lepel, closer to her husband's relatives. The couple had 2 daughters, which, it would seem, finally consolidated her new identity. For the first decade, Antonina lived in constant fear of exposure, but gradually the anxiety receded. Together with her husband, they enjoyed all the privileges of veterans. They received benefits, were awarded Jubilee medals, and were respected in society. Their photos were even exhibited in a local museum, and Antonina herself spoke to school children, talking about the war. The probability that someone could recognize her as Tonka the machine gunner was negligible. Neither her family nor her colleagues even knew about her past. However, fate intervened in her life again. In 1976, Antonina's brother, who worked at an enterprise in Tyumen, decided to go abroad. Filling out a standard questionnaire, a voluminous document requiring the enumeration of all relatives, he indicated all 6 brothers and sisters. A thorough check of the questionnaires by KGB officers revealed a strange discrepancy. The whole family had the surname Panfilov, but one of the sisters, now Ginsberg by her husband, for some reason was Makarova in her maiden name. This seemingly insignificant detail attracted the attention of the special services and became the key to solving the mystery that Antonina had been keeping for so long. Antonina's exposure began with a carefully planned check. On the eve of Victory Day, she and a group of veterans were invited to the military enlistment office, ostensibly to design another award. A KGB officer disguised as an officer of the military enlistment office quickly revealed inconsistencies in her story. She could not remember either the locations of the units where she served or the names of her colleagues. Antonina attributed this to the prescription of events and poor memory. They pretended to believe her, but in the meantime witnesses were brought from the Oriol region for identification. They all confidently confirmed her identity. By the time of her arrest in the summer of 1978, Antonina was already 58 years old. The investigators were struck by her composure. She did not deny her guilt and testified, but believed that due to the prescription of the crimes and her impeccable post-war behavior, she would not face serious punishment. However, in the fall, the court found her guilty of murdering almost 200 people, whose fates were documented, and sentenced her to death by firing squad. Antonina admitted her guilt, but listened to the verdict without visible emotion. She began to apply for clemency, but all of them were rejected. In the summer of 1979, despite the fact that this year was declared the Year of the Woman in the USSR, the sentence was carried out. However, it is difficult to call Antonina a woman in the full sense of the word. There was too much blood on her hands. Friends, subscribe to the channel, like it, and write your comments. Thank you all for watching.